All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Huge show ahead for you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, hold on, everybody. Let's just be calm. If you haven't heard the news yet, there is a client number 3 for Michael Cohen. First one was Donald Trump. Second one was a guy named Brody, who is a Republican financier. That's a tawdry story. So what's behind door number 3? Turns out, Sean Hannity. Joe Roms. Plenty of drama today. So that's a little bit later in the program. I want to give you the full explanation of that story and then the possible theories as to why he's client number 3 for Michael Cohen. Fun for everyone involved, with the notable exception of Sean Hannity. So that's a little bit later in the program. Also, terrible case of discrimination in a Starbucks in Philly. 2 black men are arrested for being 2 black men in a Starbucks. So that's unfortunately a story filled with injustice, but I think the reaction's been interesting to it. We'll have that for you in the second hour of the program. So huge show as always. Let's get started with good news. Interesting, let's go over here. Okay, we have a Republican donor who has finally had enough. Wow, just when you thought it wasn't possible. And I don't mean enough of the tax cuts that's filling up his pockets where he's like, all right guys, I'm full. I really appreciate it. I can't handle any more tax cuts. He is saying that in some way, but not in that way. He's saying it as in, what in the world did you guys do this for? Fascinating, and he's not a little donor, he's a big donor. So let me tell you all about it. Major GOP donor is jumping ship, according to Ed Mazza at HuffPost, and now he's contributing to Democratic candidates in hopes of flipping the House of Representatives and or the Senate in this year's midterm elections. So not only is he not giving to Republicans anymore, he's going to go give to Democrats to try to make a difference. His name is Seth Klarman, CEO of Baupost Group. This is originally reported by the Boston Globe, and sometimes he's apparently known as the Oracle of Boston. So let's hope the Oracle knows what he's doing in this case. So why? Well, let's go to his own quote. He said, the Republicans in Congress have failed to hold the president accountable and have abandoned their historic beliefs and values. For the good of the country, the Democrats must take back one or both houses of Congress. Strong words, but about to get stronger, apparently not a fan of Trump. He says that Trump was, quote, completely unqualified for the highest office in the land. By the way, if you're not blind, dumb, and deaf, and actually I'm positive they can also figure it out, it's super obvious how unqualified Donald Trump is, how unintelligent he is, how unethical he is. I mean, we can go down the list, but unqualified certainly, with no apparent motivation or incentive to learn. He refused to get briefings, and the list goes on and on. And yet, most of the Republicans have decided, speaking of blind, deaf, and dumb, I'm going to look away. I'm going to choose not to see it. Well, Seth Klarman says, I have eyes and I have ears, and it's obvious. And he goes further. He says that he might, in fact, Trump might be a threat to democracy. And I think he is. I don't think he believes in the concept of democracy. So now, of course, this does touch his economic interests a little bit as well. Let's keep it real. He also warned against Trump's protectionist agenda in a letter to his investors, saying such policies not only don't work, they actually leave society worse off. So you can have your own opinions about trade and those proposals of Trump. He's obviously not a fan. But now to the size of his donations. Klarman, an independent who donated more than $7 million to the GOP candidates during the presidency of Barack Obama, has now cut checks to Democrats in 56 House races and 22 Senate elections. So that's no joke. $7 million to fight against Obama, now turning around and giving in those 78 congressional elections, all to Democrats. Klarman also donated $2 million to nonprofits backing core Democratic issues, including gun control and the environment. Now back to the tax cuts, really interesting opinion there. First of all, he says something that again is very obvious. The Trump tax cuts could drive government deficits considerably higher. And in fact, they told us it was only going to be $1.1 trillion that they were adding to the deficit, which is already a hilarious statement from the guys who said deficits were terrible and unacceptable. It's only a $1.1 trillion hole in the budget, but it turns out, of course, as we found out last week, totally unsurprisingly to anyone paying attention, it's actually going to be at a minimum $1.9 trillion that they're adding to the deficit. So that part is clear, but Klarman goes on to say, I received a tax cut I neither need nor want. I'm choosing to invest it to fight the administration's flawed policies and to elect Democrats to the Senate and House of Representatives. Well, for that, you do have to give him credit for being able to say these tax cuts are totally unnecessary to wealthy individuals such as himself, and in fact, they will do damage to the economy, which does damage to all of us. So it is a good day in America, and for a guy who spent millions of dollars fighting Obama to turn around and say, I mean, if you thought Obama was bad, Trump is an absolute disaster, shows you some indication that some people have woken up and realized the horrible situation that Trump has put us in. But his comments about taxes are what I appreciate the most. That is true, and it's great to see a Republican donor admit that. Okay, now let's go to Trump and the Russian investigation. Oh no, are we allowed to discuss it? I think we're allowed to do some stories. Okay. So Donald Trump lately has actually done some things against Russia. So that's fascinating. Now, some of the things that he's done I'm not a fan of, like the bombing of Syria that he did recently. I did a video about it over the weekend. I think that's a terrible idea. I don't need him to show us how tough he is on Russia, and certainly not with bombs. I just want to make sure that he's making decisions about Russia based on what he thinks is right. I mean, God help us on that front too. But at least that they are honest decisions and not because he's beholden to Russia for one reason or another. Again, I don't need him to prove it in the form of bombs, but it is an interesting question. And James Comey was asked about it on Sunday, and he answered that he is not sure, and that Trump might be beholden to the Russians. And that's a hell of a thing for a former FBI director to say about a president. So now, on the other hand, as I just told you, he's actually done what appears to be a decent number of actions against Russia. So not only the bombings, which is a terrible idea, but some sanctions and kicking out some diplomats that I think might be good ideas. Kicked out 60 diplomats in a response to the poisoning that happened in Great Britain, and put in place some new sanctions, etc. So is Trump actually getting tough on Russia? Well, that's the story I was set to do, especially because this morning I saw that they were pushing for new sanctions in the United Nations. And I was like, look, at some point, there's enough data in where you go, it appeared that he was being soft on Russia before, but now he's arguably being hard on Russia. And then in the middle of the day, the story completely turned. So let me explain. First, we go to the Washington Post to tell you what Nikki Haley was up to. She's, of course, our ambassador to the United Nations. Haley had said on CBS's News's Face the Nation that sanctions on Russian companies behind the equipment related to Assad's alleged chemical weapons attack would be announced Monday by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Now, look, I don't know who did that bombing, and according to our own Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, we're not positive who did that chemical attack in Syria. So I definitely don't want bombs in response to it, but sanctions, if we were sure that they did it, then I wouldn't mind the sanctions at all. So, but we're not sure. So anyway, but they are getting tough on Russia, fair is fair. And Nikki Haley even said, so I think everyone is going to be feeling it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they listen to us. Well, it turns out hope was delivered. They were listening, and they said in response, the Russians, that this was, quote, international economic rating. So they said that this was done for an economic agenda and not because anyone is concerned about those chemical attacks. And they attacked the idea of sanctions in several different ways, and certainly did not agree with the bombing of Syria, obviously. So the Russians speak out. So how is that going to affect us, if at all? Because now it appears we're being tough on the Russians. Well, let's go to the Washington Post. But as officials in Moscow condemned the planned sanctions as overly punitive, Trump conferred with his national security advisors later Sunday and told them that he was upset the sanctions were being officially rolled out because he was not yet comfortable executing them, according to several people familiar with the plan. That's interesting. So all of a sudden, roll that one back. Not as much. In fact, President Trump on Monday put the brakes on a preliminary plan to impose additional economic sanctions on Russia. So it turns out we won't be doing them after all. By the way, if Trump were to have some sort of deal with some folks that are in power in Russia, whether they are government officials and or connected to oligarchs who help to run Russia, well, doing sanctions on those oligarchs would be far more relevant than some bombing campaign in the middle of Syria. Unless, of course, that bombing campaign hit a Russian soldier or plane, et cetera. That's why I don't want it. But having said that, this hits close to the bone for economic interest in Russia. All of a sudden, Trump slams the brakes on, okay? But Haley already said it. Apparently, she had it cleared earlier with someone in the administration. So what happened? Well, the Trump team decided to publicly characterize Haley's announcement as a misstatement. It didn't sound like a misstatement. It sounded very, very clear when she said it. Apparently, the big guy did not agree. Now, is this part of a pattern? Which way is the pattern going? Being hard on Russia or being soft on Russia? Well, there are mixed signals here, as I just explained to you. So let's break it down a little further and see if we can figure out who's on one side here. So, on an earlier case, relatively early on in his administration, Nikki Haley had actually also talked tough about sanctions on Russia at the United Nations. And they thought that the White House had signed off on that. Well, the guy who apparently did sign off on that was quickly thereafter removed from his job at the White House. Well, that's a sign. And here is what an anonymous US official inside the White House said to the Washington Post about that earlier situation when Trump found out that Haley had said that we were going to get tougher on Russia. Quote, "Lots of people got yelled at, some by the president." In other words, last time we tried announcing these things, Trump was furious, not at the Russians, but at us for saying that we would have imposed penalties on the Russians. Now, on the issue of the poisoning that happened of a former Russian agent in the UK, he apparently told his advisors who were pushing him to get tough on Russia on that issue, understandably so. Referring to the Europeans, he said, "We'll match their numbers. We're not taking the lead, we're matching." So very clear, don't take the lead against Russia, but we will follow. Okay, well, again, mixed, all right. So the next day, when the expulsions were announced publicly, Trump erupted, officials said. To his shock and dismay, France and Germany were each expelling only 4 Russian officials, far fewer than the 60 his administration had decided on. So apparently, his own advisors thought he meant match what all of the Europeans are doing combined, when he had said or meant match whatever is the lowest number of any of the European countries kicking out Russians. So now the camps are becoming a lot clearer once you see all the reporting coming in from within the White House. His advisors definitely want to get tough on Russia. Now, some of those ideas are terrible ideas, some of them are fine ideas, but they're in the camp of let's punish the Russians. Trump appears to be consistently against it and has to be convinced into it over and over again. Now, I know that some on the right wing think, oh, that's because he's anti-interventionist like he told us, and we believe whatever Trump tells us. Okay. Those of you on the left who think that this issue is overhyped, do you think that that Trump actually has a principle that he's in favor of peace with Russia and he's acting out of principle here? Maybe some of you do. That's not the Trump I've seen. So let's go further. The president, who seemed to believe that other individual countries would largely equal the United States, was furious that his administration was being portrayed in the media as taking by far the toughest stance on Russia. But why in the world would he be furious? Because he's got the Russian investigation being led by a special counsel that he despises. The idea that he seems to be tough publicly against Russia would seem to help him politically. Whatever the merits of that actual policy are, he's not even mad at the policy as much as he is mad at the appearance publicly that he's being tough on Russia. Now that is very curious. So why would he be mad about that? Unless he's worried about Russia's reaction. Okay, this is exceedingly clear. By the way, again, if you're in the right wing, you go, okay, I don't believe anything that the mainstream media publishes. Everything is fake news. They got in a room and just made up stories. If you're on the left wing and you've got some doubts about this story, now you might say, hey, Washington Post has a bias. But do you think they went in a room and made this up? Or do you think that these are actual sources from inside the White House? This is not the Washington Post making it up. There are sources, there are people inside the White House saying, every time we go to touch Russia, Trump gets furious. All right, more. Growing angrier, again on this issue. Growing angrier, Trump insists that his aides had misled him about the magnitude of the expulsions. And here's a quote from an anonymous official saying, there were curse words, a lot of curse words. Just picture that scene for a second. How dare you make me look tough on Russia? That's insane. Why would you say that? That's a great thing for you, to look tough on Russia. Again, put the policy aside. To look tough on Russia would only help you politically. But apparently lots of curse words, really angry about that. Because yes, the US media is seeing it. Yes, US prosecutors and politicians are seeing it. But so are certain leaders in Russia. They also see things that go publicly. Okay. The incident reflects a tension at the core of the Trump administration's increasingly hard-nosed stance on Russia. The president instinctually opposes many of the punitive measures pushed by his cabinet. That's, again, the Washington Post. Now, by the way, there's one other thing that we should be noted here. The cabinet is supposed to serve the president. If the president doesn't want to do it, they shouldn't do it. Now, as you can tell, I have deep concerns about Trump's actual motivation. And as I've told you many times before, I think the overwhelming majority of the evidence points to the fact that he is beholden to the Russians for whatever reason. I happen to think it's a financial reason, but hopefully the special counsel will find out the exact facts. But a president should not be controlled by his cabinet or by his advisors or by defense contractors. So the one thing that we've got to be principled on is these people don't get to, the military industrial complex and all that don't get to tell Trump what to do. They don't get to tell any president what to do. And if Trump wants to oppose them and oppose those policies, he should do it publicly, and he shouldn't be afraid to do it. But obviously internally, he doesn't want those policies at all, and he doesn't want the American people to find out what his motivations are. That's also curious. Okay, now, others note that Trump's ongoing unease with his own policy. Even as his administration has ratcheted up the pressure on Putin's inner circle, Trump has continued in recent weeks to make overtures to the Russian leader, congratulating him on his election win, and in a move that frustrated his national security team, inviting him to visit the White House. So that was a sham election. So for Trump, unprompted, to go and call Putin and say, congratulations on a wonderful victory, that also is an indication, one more time, because apparently people need overwhelming proof that he would like to be on good terms with Vladimir Putin, to say the least. Now back to the attack on British soil. Initially, the president was hesitant to believe the intelligence that Russia was behind the attack, a fact that some aides attributed to his contrarian personality and tendency to look for deeper conspiracies. To persuade him, his advisors warned that he would get hammered in the press if he was out of step with US allies, officials said. Apparently it took a long time to convince him. And again, since these are Trump advisors and aides, they're giving the president the benefit of the doubt. They think, no, he doesn't have a deal with the Russians. He's just, contrarian. He has different philosophies and he thinks maybe someone else did the poisoning. someone else might have done the poisoning of a Russian agent that turned on the Russians. Why? Why would they do that? Okay, anyway, no, that's not why. He never wants to punish the Russians. So I'll get to my conclusion on which way our government should go in a second. But first, again, last thing here to figure it out. Remember, they actually did do sanctions on Russia, and I pointed that out as well. Now, it's also because Congress overwhelmingly voted for it. Trump seemed to be against it, didn't enforce it for a long, long time. So what was the internal deliberations on that? In late July, Congress overwhelmingly approved new sanctions on Moscow that were widely seen as a rebuke of Trump's efforts to reach out to Putin. It took aides 4 days to persuade Trump to sign the bill, which had cleared with a veto-proof majority. Let me give you more detail. The Senate voted 98-2. There was no way that a Trump veto was going to stand. They were going to override the veto. So he had absolutely no choice, and he still took 4 days to sign the bill and had to be convinced by his aides. So look, when it comes to policy, I don't agree with the national security team that we need to be more antagonistic towards Russia, or certainly that we need to do bombings in the middle of Syria without proper investigation or evidence. So it's a funny thing, but in terms of the policy, certainly as it regards to Syria, I agree more with Trump than I do with his national security team. But in terms of who's on which side, the national security team is overly aggressive against Russia, but clearly they are the ones that are pushing the sanctions, the attacks, any kind of rebuke of Putin or Russia. Clearly they're on that side. And clearly on the other side is Donald Trump saying, no, don't do it to the Russians. Don't. Over and over and over again. And whenever he does do it, it's because they took 4 days to convince him that he basically had no choice. So come on. Look, again, if you're in the right wing, you just don't believe anything that's in the news and you don't believe any facts or reason. But I'm asking you if you're an independent or on the left wing to look at the reality of the matter and say, okay, here's where we are on policy. Here's where we are in Syria or sanctions, and everybody has different opinions on that. But in terms of whether Trump doesn't want to act against Russia, do you really believe it's out of principle because Trump is so enamored with peace? And that this is the one guy, Putin, that he doesn't want to do harsh words against. Finally, after over a year in office, in regards to the chemical attacks, he put it in a tweet and named Putin. And so that's fair, that's a data point too, okay? But overall, the overwhelming majority of the data points to he does not want to criticize Putin no matter what happens. So here we are, and again, for whatever reason, if you want to say no, you think Trump's a man of principle and he has been perfectly tough on Russia because he wanted to be, and you just don't believe any of the reporting on the issue, that's a curious choice. To the rest of us, it appears fairly obvious that Trump does not want to criticize or punish Russia. Sometimes that's a good thing in terms of policy. Sometimes it's not a good thing. But either way, I don't think he's doing it out of principle. I think he's doing it based on whatever motivations ties him personally to Russia. Okay, we got to take a break. I got a lot more coming up for you, including client number 3. Behind door number 3 of Michael Cohen's despicable clients, it turns out we find out today, is Sean Hannity. Fascinating story. We'll tell you why he might be on that list when we return.
Can we eat in here?
Once again, it's me, here at the Streamies. You people have thought that I was here to interview people. Instead, I was here to take it over for myself, my own agenda.
Congratulations on your award. Quick question, who's keeping it?
Well, we have a collective safe deposit box in Peoria, Illinois that we will be putting it in.
You have to plan ahead.
She's gonna lay like this.
You could hang your tank tops on it, and then I could put my coat on it.
Or maybe a towel.
I can hold your award. I'd be happy to do it. Okay, good. I'll just hold this real quick. Can you just get this for my mom? Just she has no idea the difference. I love how the different shots that you use, and I love how we really get a glimpse of sort of your day-to-day life, but you show it in a really unique way. Was that intentional to sort of set yourself apart using editing, using camera work?
No, I just think that like watching somebody's daily life is really fucking boring. And the
Yes.
only thing that stands between boring and interesting is an edit.
This year also has been a pretty big year for you politically. You have sat down with, I mean, do you want to just name, Hillary Clinton?
Yes, our next president, hashtag I'm with her.
Oh!
I'm just gonna put that out
I mean,
there.
I already knew that, but I feel like it's powerful now. You just said it, you know?
I mean, come on. I'm actually going to Florida next week and knocking on doors and try to get all my fans, make sure the millennials, you go out and you vote is very important.
What's next?
Oh, what's next? Just, world domination.
Yes.
And stuff.
More matching tattoos with Grace.
Yes, exactly. But honestly, what's next is whatever I can do to be a positive light in this world is what I'm going to do.
Did you ever think when you started making YouTube videos that you'd be holding an award?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah. An Oscar.
You're the first. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. You're the first person that said other people. They're like, no.
People always ask me that. Did you think you were gonna have 10 million subscribers? Did you think you were gonna be in a movie and all this stuff? And I say yes. You have to believe in yourself, ignorantly almost, or arrogantly almost, to the point where you have to believe in yourself when no one else does. So obviously, I believed in myself.
Once again, I am here backstage. Thus far, no one has suspected that it's not really Grace, it's an imposter. Good.
So congratulations on winning Show of the Year. Did you expect this?
I was hoping. I was thinking they were going to be top 3. I thought Good Mythical Morning might take it because they're a great show. They have a great audience. But I'm glad they didn't. Is that an okay thing to say?
I'm glad they lost.
I'm glad they lost. I mean, I'm glad I won, but also that they lost because that's the only way that I would have won.
Yeah. I've watched your videos since I was like a kid. Like I don't know if I was a kid, but for a while.
I'm a dinosaur on YouTube now.
No, I wasn't gonna say that. I mean, you're not. Okay. But hey, you've been doing good content for that long. That's what's awesome.
And also, if I'm a dinosaur, what's Jink?
Lots of stories, lots of rage, lots of young Turks. Let's do it. What is this? Living legend Anna Kasparian. God, I love this show. I love this job.
I love this tweet from the other Russert.
Had a rough last few days and missed TYT yesterday. The theme started playing and my week instantly got better. I shouldn't read this tweet. Should I read it? I'll read it.
Cenk, we're in the middle of the show, for crying out loud.
Oh my God.
If there's a debate, there's an election night. Don't even think about going anywhere else because we are going to lose our minds here. All right, back on the Young Turks. You caught me looking at tweets. Jay writes in, it's funny he figured out that Trump was a dumbass after the tax cuts. Well, I know, but he did criticize the tax cuts. That's referring to Klarman, who is the Republican donor who flipped and is now supporting Democrats. A suspended account, also a little jaded, saying, yeah, he's going to buy off the Democrats now. Well, I hear you. I would obviously, as you know, get to vote to get all the money out of politics, including the money going to Democrats and Republicans. Okay, Chelsea Charles writes in on YouTube Super Chat, Cenk is on fire today, but really, when isn't he? Why, thank you, Chelsea, appreciate it. When you make a comment on YouTube Super Chat, it helps the show. And by the way, if you miss any part of this show or Dan Rather's show earlier today, make sure that you become a member, tytnetwork.com/join, so you can get the whole show. Now, let's get to some serious fun. Let's go over here. Well, you know Michael Cohen's offices were raided, and so were his home and his hotel room. He's, of course, the personal attorney for Donald Trump. But he's more than that. He also handles business for Donald Trump, and he's considered a fixer overall. So there's an excellent question as to which of his documents are protected under attorney-client privilege and which are not. So some have to do with business, so they're not at all protected. Some do have to do with him being a lawyer for Donald Trump. Now, those dealings that relate to a crime would not be protected. The ones that do not relate to a crime would be protected. So you really do need some independent lawyers at the Justice Department or in prosecutor's office to sift through that and make sure that they contain the evidence that actually is protected under attorney-client privilege, and they do have that. There's a team that unfortunately is named the Taint Team that makes sure that none of the documents or any evidence that is actually protected gets into any prosecution. So Michael Cohen's team and Donald Trump's team think that is not nearly enough. Now that is normally how you would do things, but they have a different idea. Now that might be driven partly by their panic, as Maggie Haberman, New York Times reporter, reports earlier today. They say you could tell, she explained that you could basically tell, and she used this analogy, how bad the situation is if you're on a plane, for example, based on whether the flight attendants are panicking. Okay, if they're calm, then everything's gonna be fine and it's normal. If they're panicking, oh boy. Well, in this case, the analogy is to Donald Trump's lawyers. And apparently they're in a panic over the Michael Cohen raid. She said the lawyers are not calm. That is your hint about what is going on here. It may not end up mattering, but there are few people who know as much as Michael Cohen. My guess is it will matter, and it'll probably matter a lot. So what are they asking for instead of having the Taint Team looking at all the evidence seized from Cohen's offices and homes? Lawyers for President Donald Trump's personal attorney say investigators, quote, took everything during raids last week on his residence and office. Now, I don't know what to call that. I don't know if that's white privilege, rich privilege, Trump privilege, I don't know, right-wing privilege, whatever it is. But the idea that the FBI would come in and seize all the evidence seems incredibly normal to the rest of us. But for them, they're like, they took all of the evidence. They didn't even leave half of it behind. Why would they leave any of it behind? What a preposterous thing to presume. All right, I love the idea of some regular old bank robber or anyone else. They come in here, they took all the evidence. They took all the tapes of me coming into the bank. Why didn't you leave half the tapes behind? Only this level of criminals can make these kind of assumptions because they're used to power being on their side and protecting them. All right, the letter that they sent demanded Trump and Cohen's lawyers be allowed to decide which items seized are protected by attorney-client privilege before criminal prosecutors see them. You want to talk about privilege? They say, no. Now, prosecutors, I know you've seized evidence of my law breaking, but I'd like that back, and then I'll decide which ones I want to give you. That happened in your trial, right? I mean, if you've ever been tried, you get to go to the judge and go, now, look, I'd love for the prosecutors to have all this evidence. I'm sorry, but I just can't. I'm gonna need all the evidence back, and then I'll give the prosecutor the evidence that suits my interests. And the judge goes, well, that seems like a perfectly fair request. Let's hash that out. No, that's not how it goes. So, of course, that is denied. Trump's lawyers go even further. Now, they're Joanna Hamden, Christopher Dysart, and Reed Keefe. They wrote that potentially privileged information was seized during the raid. They argue that Trump should be able to review those documents before a Taint Team made up of federal agents and prosecutors to ensure his right to attorney-client privilege. So prosecutors shouldn't decide what's privileged. The judge shouldn't decide what's privileged under the law. Just Trump should decide. Trump, he's like, yeah, give me all that stuff back. Okay, yeah, this you're not going to get to see any of this. Okay, is Trump a lawyer? No. Is Trump's lawyers are going to decide it? But Trump wants to take a look himself and make sure that they have the right evidence. That's not how it works. Okay. Now the lawyers say, quote, there is as well cause for concern that a Taint Team could not evaluate Mr. Cohen's files, and in particular those relating to the president, fairly. So let me get this right. Seasoned federal prosecutors, their boss appointed by Donald Trump and his boss appointed by Donald Trump, cannot be fair enough. But Donald Trump himself, about an investigation about him, would be fairer. I'm sure he'd be fair to himself. Would he be fair to the facts? That's a preposterous claim. Just take out Trump, put in any other defendant. Your Honor, I think the prosecutors are not being fair to my client. I think my client should get to decide all the evidence in this case because he would be way fairer to himself. That is not an argument likely to win. Okay, so in a Monday letter to Judge Kimba Wood, Cohen's team wrote that either they or an independent third party known as a special master, these are all fun terms, should conduct the initial review of the materials to filter out anything protected by attorney-client privilege and avoid, quote, even the appearance of impropriety. Federal agents have seized documents in your home, hotel room, and office. There is an appearance of impropriety on your part, not their part, okay? And they are not just willy-nilly taking all the documents and saying we're gonna use them. No, they have a different team that is not part of the prosecution that is going to look to see which ones are attorney-client privileged, and if they are, they're not gonna let the prosecutors see it. And to say that that system is not as fair as the defendant looking at his own papers and deciding which ones the court gets to see, it's a preposterous argument. By the way, not exactly the best judge to make it to either. Judge Kimba Wood denied the Attorney General position when Bill Clinton put her up because of some controversies that the Republicans brought up. Oops. Anyway, look, she's been on the bench for a long, long time, and there's no hint of impartiality there either, but it's a tough draw for them. It doesn't matter because their argument is absolutely ridiculous. Continuing, Judge Wood asked Cohen's team during a Friday hearing to turn over an approximate list of individuals with whom Cohen had engaged in an attorney-client relationship, as well as an estimate of how much of the seized material was covered by that privilege. You're saying, hey, look, there's stuff in there that you don't need that's attorney-client privilege, especially with other clients. So she's like, okay, great, who's the other clients? He's like, yeah, about that, we don't really want to tell you. Well, that's because it turns out we found out today it was Sean Hannity. So finally on this issue, attorneys for both Trump and Cohen have requested permission to carry out the initial review of the seized materials, though Trump's lawyers don't agree that a special master would serve as a good backup option. So they're saying, no, I don't even want anyone seeing these documents outside of Donald Trump. Gee, I wonder why. Well, whether they like it or not, people are gonna see those documents, the prosecutors are. Of course, this is preposterous and won't stand. You don't get to pick the evidence against you. That's not how it works in this justice system. So, request denied. All right, now we move on to client number 3. So Michael Cohen's officer raided, as you know, his home, hotel room, etc. He apparently has 3 clients. Donald Trump we know about. Well, another guy we did know about, his name is Brody, and we found out about him because of this, partly because of this raid. He outed himself when it looked like people were going to find out who he is. He is a person high up in the Republican Party these days, mainly because he gives an incredible amount to Republicans. He also gave an incredible amount to his mistress, who was a Playboy model. He gave her $1.6 million. And she had an abortion with a kid that she said she was gonna have with him. Now, we don't know if she was telling the truth or not, whether she was actually pregnant, but she claimed she had an abortion. And the guy says, well, I paid her the $1.6 million, but not for the abortion, if you say so. Now, those are 2 of the 3 clients. The 3rd client we didn't know. So here's what happened in the proceedings. As you can tell, I think you're about to find out who it is. Disclosing the identity of this 3rd unnamed client or other previous clients Cohen has engaged would, quote, according to his lawyers, most certainly be embarrassing and detrimental to those clients. Well, it has been so far. Looking forward to more. Cohen's team has not met the standard for any exception to the notion that client identity and even fee arrangements must be revealed, according to Judge Kimba Wood. So she's hearing them out on that, and she says, no, there is no law that says it's gonna be embarrassing to your client, so we have to keep his name hidden. That's not really how it works. And you're not even proposing a legal precedent that I could rule on here. So continuing, I understand that he doesn't want his name out there, but that's not enough under the law, according to Judge Wood. So finally, they say, all right, give us the client. They're like, can we write it down? They're like, no, just say it, who's the client? And they had to finally say in court, the client's name is Sean Hannity. Dun, 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 as the world turns. And obviously that's why you're looking at Hannity's picture on the graphic. So we turn to Hannity for his response. We've been friends a long time, referring to Michael Cohen. I have sought legal advice from Michael. Well, do tell. On what? There was a report out today that it might have been on the issue of the ad boycotts on Fox News, and perhaps Hannity hiring private investigators to go after left-wing groups who might have started those boycotts. But Hannity came out with a statement later saying, no, that was not it. That's interesting, so that's not it. What is it then? Remember, the other two clients are Donald Trump, in a world of legal trouble and panicked over what they might find, and Brody, who paid a Playboy model mistress $1.6 million. So geez, Lord mercy, Hannity, what have you done? So here's more tweets from Hannity responding. Michael Cohen has never represented me in any matter. I never retained him, received an invoice, or paid legal fees. I've occasionally had brief discussions with him about legal questions about which I wanted his input and perspective. But that's not what the papers say. The papers say you're client number 3. So he acknowledges that he did talk to Michael Cohen and ask for legal advice. He says he wasn't billed and wasn't officially a client, and none of this is important. Please look away. So wait, by the way, are you calling Michael Cohen a liar? Because I'm sure investigators and prosecutors looking into the different criminal actions of Michael Cohen might want to talk to you if you think Michael Cohen is a liar and you weren't actually his client. That's also interesting. Hannity says in another tweet, I assumed those conversations were confidential, but to be absolutely clear, but they never involved any matter between me and a third party. What third party might they involve? We'll get to that in a second. But first, I'm amused by Fox News' reaction to this story. This is the entirety of it when it broke. Watch.
Now, in today's proceedings that are underway right now, Stephen Ryan, one of Cohen's attorneys, was asked by the judge to specifically name the other name because they said it would not fall under attorney-client privilege to withhold that name. And he stood up and named him as Sean Hannity. So moving on to the rest of what's happening today.
Yeah, indeed. So moving on, turns out it was Sean Hannity. Anyway, let's never speak of it again. A little different reaction on MSNBC.
Inside that courtroom that the third client, Michael Cohen's third client, is Sean Hannity.
Wow. I'm going to, Paul, this is yours first.
Slightly different reactions. Moving on to wow. Okay. Now, is Hannity concerned about himself? Now, look at this clip where he's talking to Steve Bannon. It's a little while back, and he says something curious. Here's Sean Hannity talking to Bannon.
It's a banana republic.
They're willing to destroy this country to keep control and to keep the people out.
Okay, I want to say.
By the way, people like us may end up in jail. Let me tell you, they will stop at nothing. This is what I'm trying to get across to people. This is serious.
People like you might wind up in jail. Well, that would be one reason to have an attorney. Do tell Sean on what charges. Okay, so now some folks have brought up the old charges that Debbie Schlussel leveled at him. She's another conservative commentator. Now we go to Rachel Stockman, reporting for Law and Crime. It is unclear what Cohen's representation was regarding, and it was not revealed in court. However, there was a recent media scandal involving a woman who accused Hannity of making unwanted sexual advances, which matched the time frame exactly. In addition, at the time, Hannity said that he had retained a team of lawyers to fight the false accusations. Okay, well, Michael Cohen's a lawyer, so I don't know why he doesn't admit it, but I don't know that that's the reason at all, for reasons I'll get to in 1 second. In April 2017, Debbie Schlussel, a former Fox News guest, appeared on a local radio show last April and recounted an incident where she claims Sean Hannity asked her to a hotel, and when she rebuffed his advances, she claims she was ostracized by the network star. Now, I'm going to be fair to Sean Hannity here, probably a favor he will probably not return. But Debbie Schlussel, if you've ever seen her work, is not the most trusted source for news. And in that case, later she went on to say, well, he didn't invite me to his hotel room. He invited me to a hotel. They were on location in Detroit. And she said, well, they didn't let me on after I said no. And then she clarified, well, they did let me on again, but afterwards I was banned. Which one is it? And if you were banned afterwards, why? She says, oh, it's because they were discriminating against me. They claimed it was because because of my performance. Well, we do have a performance on tape. Now, these were some YouTube videos that she used to put up until we commented on them, and she got so embarrassed she left YouTube altogether. Anyways, here is, for better or for worse, and trust me, it's for worse, Debbie Schlussel.
Also for Debbie Does Politics. So, the queen of daytime talk has endorsed BO. No, not the smelly BO, but the presidential BO. That's right, Oprah Winfrey endorsed Barack Obama, as you've probably heard.
No, not that kind of BO. There is some chance that Fox News didn't discriminate, but didn't find her to be a compelling guest, or apparently a compelling editor. I'm needlessly amused by this part, but look at the edits here in this video about the $2,300, which she must have misstated in the beginning. Watch.
While we're all regulated to a lousy $2,300 for presidential candidate. Sure, I can't really afford to pay $2,300 to any presidential candidate of my choice.
Okay, now we're being gratuitous. Anyway, I'm not sure that I believe Debbie Schlussel's charges. They're not even charges. She said, I didn't file anything legally. And she says, I don't even know if I'd characterize it as sexual harassment, but he's a creep and all this stuff. So they've got a war going on there. I don't know why Hannity wouldn't admit it was Schlussel. If it was Schlussel, that's probably a winning argument for him. So there's some chance it's not Schlussel. And if it's not Schlussel, and it's not the ad boycott, and it's something that Cohen's own lawyers said would be very detrimental to client number 3. Sean, we're all dying to find out. What was it? Tick tock, until we find out. But meanwhile, let the speculation run amok throughout the internet. All right, I gotta take a quick break here. I got a lot more for you guys, including Syria. Look, lighthearted and serious. So on the one hand, I hate that we did the bombing. I did a video about it over the weekend. I'm gonna tell you more about it and who benefited from it. On the other hand, Alex Jones crying over it, it's too funny. Okay, so it's not that he's crying over Syria. That would be, I don't know about justified, but understandable, I guess. He's crying over his hurt feelings about Trump. Oh, that's too good. All right, we'll do that. Literally crying, by the way, when we come back.
I'm gonna go. Take care of yourselves. R2, you're the oldest. You're my only hope, buddy. All right.
Welcome back, and thanks for watching. Special thanks to our guest, Hillary Clinton. Hey, Hillary, thanks for being our guest, and really, thanks for allowing me to be within 4 feet of you without charging me $3,000. But I want to give you a proper thank you, Hillary, and so can we get some thank you note writing music, please? Thank you, Hillary Clinton, for always sticking to the issues, even when people criticize you for superficial things, like your hair and your appearance, and the Iraq War, and that thing about super predators, and privatizing prisons and gutting welfare and the Defense of Marriage Act and for that Syria no-fly zone thing. Opposing free college, opposing single payer, opposing raising the minimum wage to $15, being a proud Goldwater girl, Wall Street deregulation, repealing that New Deal, media consolidation. Thank you, Hillary Clinton, for normalizing the Bush family, for smearing Bernie Sanders and blaming Russia, blaming women, blaming sexism, blaming the media, blaming Bernie Sanders, blaming Obama, blaming James Comey, the DNC, Facebook, blaming a third-party candidate, blaming Sanders for not being a third-party candidate, blaming the difference between cats and dogs, blaming people for not blaming all the people you're blaming. Blaming blame. You showed girls everywhere that politics isn't a popularity contest, mainly by being really, really unpopular. I mean, if politics were a popularity contest, we would have nominated someone who consistently pulled ahead of Donald Trump, like Bernie Sanders. Thank you, Hillary Clinton, for being the most experienced candidate ever at not standing up for anything. And thank you, Hillary Clinton, for standing up to the critics who said a woman couldn't run for president as a Democrat when she was really a Republican. Thank you, Hillary.
Hi, I'm Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Before we do breaking news with Brett Ehrlich, I'd like to do some vocal warm-ups. Ribbit! I pooped a sandwich. I pooped a sandwich. I'm ready.
All right, guys, we got a ton of stories for you guys. Back on the Young Turks here. So let's get going. Let's go over to Crime Man. Okay. So, over the weekend, Donald Trump ordered bombings in Syria. I was dead set against it. I think it's a bad idea. Alex Jones also thinks it's a bad idea. Quite sorry that I have to agree with him on that. But this story, in an otherwise incredibly serious issue, is a little bit lighthearted because of, as usual, Alex Jones' way over the top reaction. Him cursing wouldn't be that big a deal, and we're going to go to that in a second. But it's the fact that he is not just disappointed in the policy, but apparently he's done with Donald Trump. Ooh. And he's so mad about it that he literally cried. So before we get to the crying, let's show you him as he's about to react to the story. Are they going to go live, not live? Here, let's watch.
34 hours live. We're getting ready to go live on the main feeds on InfoWars. It's freaking emergency. Trump is absolutely crapped all over us. He's been totally compromised, blackmailed. There's no damn doubt about it. Okay. You know, Trump did this on Friday night and only hit like 5 targets instead of 70 as some type of appeasement to the globalists and everything else. This is total horse. So, look, I'm gonna straight shoot you. Trump did good on TPP and everything else. This is BS, man. I mean, the damn rebels are Al-Qaeda, ISIS. They launched the chemical attacks. They've been caught 3 times before. And I'm not going to sell out my morals for Donald Trump, damn it. See, I can't even go live. I'm so pissed right now. Why don't you just kill that feed? Just go back to another live feed, dude.
Okay.
Just kill the feed. Right. Just kill it. Just kill it. And let's.
Look, is it performance art? I get it, yes. I would have preferred that he chose mime as his vehicle for that performance art, but he didn't. He went in the opposite direction. Are we going live? Oh my God, so kill the feed, man, kill the feed, I'm too upset. You didn't realize that you were live? Okay, come on. But look, the relevant part here is Alex Jones constantly brags about his access to Donald Trump. And he's pushing Donald Trump in a more right-wing direction and a more lunatic direction, if you ask me. Well, he just said that Trump dumped all over the right wing, and I guess Alex Jones and his fans, that he's compromised. We have it. The first conspiracy theory from Alex Jones on Donald Trump. By the way, not compromised or blackmailed by the Russians, but the opposite he's claiming. Compromised by someone else to be against the Russians. Fascinating. Okay, and he's not gonna sell out his morals for effing Donald Trump. But that is not the only F-bomb. Let's have fun.
Damn it, man. What the f? Is there nobody here in this damn world? See, now I'm this right now. Syria fought Al Qaeda, they fought ISIS, they fought it all. And now you got Mattis and all these people all over us. And the damn liberal fascists censoring us everywhere the last 2 days. We did an emergency 36-hour broadcast trying to stop this that could lead to World War III. And you liberal pieces of you support this you damn degenerate and Mueller and Comey and you. Every major analyst. See, I shouldn't even be on there right now. I shouldn't be on there right now. When the are we going live? I can't do this anymore.
We're ready to go live.
Trump and these people.
Hey, we're ready to go live.
Okay. Should we shut these feeds down and delete those? And I'm going to try to control myself.
Yes.
Dude, just shut those feeds down and restart them, okay?
The one time, again, I'll agree with Alex Jones is when he said we shouldn't be on air right now. Yeah, nailed it. But again, it's all fake. He knows that all this stuff's going to go out. And so, but hey guys, the good news is we're almost done with him. Because if he's not talking to the president, he's not relevant, he can do all of his antics in the three-ring circus somewhere else, and we can stop talking about him. So we're almost there. First, we're gonna need a little bit of tears though. He's gonna start talking about, there's two things I need you to notice. One is, the beginning of the clip, he's talking about his own child custody case and he brings that into this for whatever reason. And then the tears begin about the betrayal that Trump has done to Alex Jones, which is awesome. And then his co-host reaction at the end is also awesome. Let's watch.
Stop supporting Trump. And it's the opposite of what my ex-wife says. She says, you know, oh, the system took the kids away from me. No, you got the kids back because of who I was part of the time. And then they sit there and they're like, you know, if you just turn against Trump, things will be better. But he was doing good, and that's what makes it so bad. Oh, and that's what makes it so bad. If he'd have been a piece of crap from the beginning, it wouldn't be so bad. But we made so many sacrifices, and now he's crapping all over us. It makes me sick.
I love the way he looks at his co-host like, are you gonna say anything? And the guy's gotta be thinking, what am I gonna say after that? Okay. We'll get back to the co-host in a second. That's what makes it so bad. Oh, Bart, you gotta get that on the soundboard. He seems like he's a special kind of snowflake. What happened, Alex? Did you get triggered? Do you need a safe space from Donald Trump? And they said we had a meltdown on election night? We were disappointed. That's a meltdown. All right, I like the host reaction, co-host reaction to this one too. His name is J. Owen Stroyer, apparently. So now Alex has turned his wrath back to Hillary, but I love their interaction. Watch.
Gonna stop.
Yeah, so it's
There's
no
never
winning.
enough unless we put dirtbag Hillary in and worship that ugly damn piece of.
That got awkward. The first to look like, ooh, and then, what do you want me to say? J. Owen, there isn't much to say. Okay, but one last piece of investigative work here at the Young Turks. We actually found not only video, but we found pictures of the before and after of Alex Jones before the Donald Trump betrayal and after the Donald Trump betrayal, and you'll never believe it. He looks totally different. John Oliver, back to you. Okay, Oh, that was fun. That's all I have on that. Now, let's get serious on Syria, because it is a very, very important issue. Okay. So on Friday night, Trump administration announced that they were doing bombing of Syrian positions. So this is very serious business because it can get us entangled in a very messy war in the Middle East. Number one, that's a terrible idea. Number two, the Russians are on the other side. God forbid if we were to hit any Russian planes or troops, well, we could start a much, much larger war. This is all terrible news for all the rest of us. And I know that most of the mainstream media is in favor of this. They put on so-called experts day in and day out. They got people like Andrea Mitchell who are coming out and saying, if Donald Trump wants to be tough, he's got to show people that he's tough and he can't be like Obama. Then you've got the usual war hawks like Lindsey Graham and John McCain saying those things as well. And I'm absolutely against any military intervention in Syria. It's a quagmire of extreme proportions, and we're going to get stuck there just like we did in Iraq. We're going to lose a ton of money. We're going to lose a lot of lives, and at the end of the day, well, we'll have made the situation worse, just like we did in Iraq. So I think that almost all of us will lose out of this, and I think most sane people recognize that. Certainly the American people do. They don't want any more Middle Eastern conflict. That's part of the reason they voted for Trump. Trump said he was going to get us out of those. He said Iraq was a mess and that he wasn't going to make that mistake in Syria as he bombed Syria today. Yet another broken promise. No one's surprised by that. But I don't want you to think that no one benefited from these bombings. Some people very materially benefited. And those are the folks who work for defense contractors. So let me give you that story. Fortune reporting that Raytheon stock surged Friday morning after 59 of the company's Tomahawk missiles were used to strike Syria in Donald Trump's first major military operation as president. So some people gained a lot, or in this case, a giant defense contractor. So I'm going to get to my conclusions in a second, but let me give you all the facts. The Tomahawk missiles used in the strike is made by Raytheon, whose stock opened 2.5 points higher Friday. That's 2.5 percentage points, adding more than $1 billion to the defense contractor's market capitalization. So what might have been a disaster for the rest of us was great news for Raytheon to the tune of $1 billion. But it's not just them. The shares of other missile and weapons manufacturers, including Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics, each rose as much as 1%, collectively gaining nearly $5 billion in market value as soon as they began trading, even as the broader markets fell. So within the context of the markets, this was even more outstanding because everything else is falling, but they are rising because of the bombings. Now, when I say that this is not a coincidence, that those same defense contractors pour in millions, and actually over a set of years, billions, in both campaign contributions, independent expenditures, and lobbying, and that they would like a return on their investment, and that return on their investment for them, because they're weapons manufacturers, is more war. People then turn around, and especially in the mainstream press, and say that sounds a little conspiratorial. So let's break that down. Which part is the conspiracy? The part where corporations would like to make more money? Well, if that's a conspiracy, it's pretty out and open. Of course, they want to make more money. It's not a matter of even wanting. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make more money. And in their case, they don't produce sneakers, they don't produce hamburgers, they don't produce textbooks. What they produce is bombs and aircraft to deliver those bombs and the missile systems to deliver those. So they profit from war. That's not a conspiracy, that's a fact. Absolute bottom line, and you just saw it. Just today they gained $5 billion. So the idea that they are, out of the goodness of their hearts, they would be true patriots and say, no, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin would like nothing but peace so that no one ever buys our materials again and we all go bankrupt. That's not only laughable, that's a conspiracy theory. That's a weird conspiracy that they got together in a room and decided, let's make sure that we don't maximize profit. Does anyone really believe that? Do you think that the lobbying that those corporations are doing for our politicians, and by the way, the revolving door that they use for our retired generals, where they pay them a ton of money and then have them go on TV and tell us how necessary war is, that's all for their health? That's all because they want peace and love and unicorns throughout the planet? Or could it be that that is to maximize profit, exactly as they have a responsibility to do? We should have a responsibility to protect our own democracy and our own government and not let them contribute to politicians. Private financing leads to our politicians working for private interests. So don't be surprised the next time we all seem to suffer, like in the Iraq War, but some people gain very, very handsomely. And those are the ones contributing to the politicians. Now, overall, the Trump era has been fantastic for them. As Fortune explains, defense contractor stocks have risen in the months since Trump was elected, spurred by his promises of a, quote, historic increase in US military spending. The budget Trump proposed last month includes an additional $52 billion for the Department of Defense. Boeing stock has gained nearly 21% since the election, while General Dynamics stock is up 14% over the same period. And yes, those are a little to a lot ahead of the gains of the rest of the market for this year, and since Trump has been in office. So while some of us lose, others win big time, or as Trump would say, bigly. So when you see the disaster unfold in front of your eyes, and you ask the question, how could that have possibly happened? This is how it happened. For God's sake, end the money in politics. If you don't, these politicians are never going to represent us. And they're going to represent defense contractors that want more war so they can have more profit. They're going to represent gun manufacturers that want more crime and more murder and mayhem so that more people will buy guns and they will make further profit. They will represent private prison, which wants what? More prisoners so they can make more money and maximize profit. If you have them serving those companies instead of us, we have lost our democracy entirely. That is why we make one seemingly bad decision after another. It's bad for America, but it's great for the private financiers of our politicians. Wolf-pack.com. That is a movement to get money out of politics. You have to join it right now. If we don't get money out of politics and get an amendment to do so, these wars will never, ever end. Young Turks.
The theory that some progressives had about Trump getting elected being a good thing because he would destroy so badly that people would be ready to throw in support for a true progressive. But I'm worried that the opposite is happening, that Trump is so extreme and so disastrous that he has now desensitized us to politicians that we typically would not like and not support. Even on the right, like, oh, if we could just impeach Trump and then we can have Pence. It's changed our standards. It's lowered our standards for politicians.
So Anna, that's a great point. Now, all of a sudden, Corker's the middle? Are you kidding me? And what do the Democrats do? They just accept it. They're thrilled because they're like, well, that's the number one trick they have, which is, well, you can't vote for the other guy. We have a better deal. Better than what? Better than Trump. Oh my God. You want to talk about damning with faint praise. You want to talk about a low bar. They have lowered the bar so low that it's at Trump. Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show, it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it.
We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on the live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
It's opening up my head.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against Fox. I never want to see another man's foot ever. They're barefoot on a plane. It's not
I'm gonna build a wall inside of you. I'm gonna put an anchor in you. I'm gonna space.
I told you we were coming.
I mean, you talk about it when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is. All right, back on the Young Turks, Jen Canano with you guys. Sexy Speed Racer writes in, we simply must take profit out of making weapons of all kinds and out of polluting the planet as well. 100% agreed. Otherwise, capitalism must be killed off for the common good of our planet and species. And you know, that part I don't really agree with. I'd be curious to see what happens with so-called capitalism if we take money out of politics. And we don't have to be overly curious because look at Europe. They don't have money in politics like we do. You can't just go and buy politicians. Their elections are not open auctions. They might be in Russia where the oligarchs rule, and they might be in other countries where the rich and powerful have seized power. They're not in a lot of Europe. They are here in America. It's an open auction. If you took that part of it out, as you see in a lot of parts of Europe, capitalism survives. And what does it do? It adapts to a mixed economy, which is partly socialism, partly capitalism. Germany has a wonderful model where labor is on their board. So anyway, I think it's complicated. So now on to Alex Jones, which is fun. Super Last Thing says, I find myself rejuvenated with Alex Jones's tears.
Yeah, same.
Okay. SOS says, damn, talk about insanity in the control room. But in that case, I think it was insanity in the studio.
Yeah.
And Addie on YouTube Super Chat chipped in a good amount of money. Thank you, Addie. And she said, money well spent. She or he, sorry, I don't know. But thank you guys. If you use YouTube Super Chat, you help the show, and we really, really appreciate it. And of course, membership gets you the whole show anytime you want, ad-free at tytnetwork.com/join. Okay, Casper, you got a lot for us. Let's do it.
All right. Over the weekend, a video went viral on social media featuring two black men, unidentified black men, who got arrested at a Starbucks. This story began when the two had gone to this particular Starbucks in Philly, and they were waiting for a real estate developer in order to have this meeting about possible investment opportunities. Now, the two had not purchased anything at the Starbucks. They were still waiting for the real estate developer to show up. And at one point, one of these men went up to a worker at Starbucks and asked for the bathroom key to use the restroom. At that point, the employee denied access to the bathroom and told them that they needed to leave because they hadn't purchased anything. When the two refused to leave, this worker called 911. I'm not kidding, called 911, which is supposed to be reserved for emergencies, but nonetheless, 6 police officers showed up because of course it takes 6 police officers to deal with the situation, and the 2 got arrested. Now we're gonna show you the video, or at least a portion of the video that went viral. It's received up to 9 million views this morning alone. I'm sure at this point it's gone way past 9 million. But with that said, take a quick look.
What did they get called for? Because there are 2 black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, well, what did they do? What did they do? Someone told me what they did.
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing.
They didn't. What did they do?
Bathroom, and the woman said it's for paying customers after us eat. They didn't do anything.
So the 2 unidentified men were taken out in handcuffs soon after, which you can see in the video. They were held for nearly 9 hours before being released. No charges were filed because they didn't break any law. They didn't do anything wrong. They did what the vast majority of people tend to do at Starbucks, which is loiter. And Starbucks, by the way, really quickly, Cenk, is known as a community hub. They're always advertising about their free Wi-Fi. They want people to come there and just hang out, which is why oftentimes you can't even find a place to sit at Starbucks. I've done it a billion times. I have literally walked into a Starbucks without buying anything just to use their bathroom. I always get the key with a smile. So it's just interesting to see how these 2 individuals were treated compared to the vast majority of patrons at Starbucks.
I believe loitering is their business model. They want people to come and hang out. And it was a unique business model when they started. People were like, oh, you're crazy. If people aren't buying stuff, you should be kicking them out. And Starbucks said, no, we have a revolutionary new idea. We're not gonna kick them out unless they happen to be black, in which case we're gonna have them arrested.
We're gonna call 911.
Yeah, now look, to be fair, Starbucks did not do this from corporate headquarters. The store manager in this case happened to do it. And Starbucks is over the top apologetic, and we'll get to that in a second, which is good. But Andrew Yaffe was the real estate development guy that was supposed to meet with them. And he said, why would they be asked to leave? He said, it's absolute discrimination. Does anybody else think this is ridiculous?
You could actually see him in the video. He was the person who was kind of speaking up, and I'm glad that he did it. But regardless of what he had to say, the officers were pretty dead set on arresting these 2 guys.
Yeah, and I think that part of what happened was the call in the first place. The second thing that happened is no one is ever allowed to de-escalate a situation, right? So now luckily, nothing physical happened here other than putting them in handcuffs, leading them out in front of everybody, which is also physical, and we should never understate the very act of arresting someone as state violence, right? Now, if it has to be done to protect the community, we all understand that, and that's what we signed up for, and that's why we agree to policing. But if it doesn't have to be done, that is a pretty significant action to take against a human being. And in this case, the cops say, well, we went in and they wouldn't leave. Okay, but were they doing anything wrong in the first place? You came and you assessed the situation. Were they breaking any laws? No, you decided that you can't have your authority questioned, hence they had to be arrested. You know how long they spent in prison or in jail? 9 hours. 9 hours for sitting in a Starbucks. Have I done their drug and your drug where I've gone into Starbucks and not bought something? Yes. But see, look, I don't love the term white privilege, but we talked about this a lot on the show. This is exactly what it means. It doesn't mean that if you're in the middle of Kentucky and you're a white person, you're rich. It means that you go into a Starbucks and don't get randomly arrested. You just don't realize it. I mean, it's not a thing that you celebrate, like, hey, high five, use the Starbucks bathroom, didn't get arrested. But for black Americans, unfortunately, it happens far too often.
I think the problem with white privilege, or at least the pushback that you get every time you mention it, is because it's hard for some people to comprehend something that they haven't experienced, right?
Yes.
And so white privilege is really something that people don't experience. It's not something that they do experience. And what I mean by that is that you still have to work really hard. You're still gonna struggle. No one's gonna hand you anything. You're not gonna necessarily get, these incredible opportunities handed to you left and right. It just means that there are certain things you don't have to deal with that other people do have to deal with. So for instance, look, I mean, when has anyone ever walked into a Starbucks without seeing a room full of douchebags on their MacBook Pros all day long? By the way, I'm one of those douchebags. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, I've never had to worry about an employee at Starbucks telling me I needed to leave because I haven't purchased anything. I've never had to worry about that kind of harassment. And for the vast majority of Starbucks patrons, they also haven't had to deal with that kind of harassment. But the fact that someone would call 911 on these guys is insane.
It's not a normal police call. 911 is, I got an emergency, okay? And so one of the excuses that was used later was, well, there was an armed robbery at a Starbucks.
Whatever.
Nearby at some point, blah, blah, blah. Wait, so why didn't you call the cops on anyone else at the Starbucks? Like, were you really worried that he went to the bathroom and hence was about to do an armed robbery when he was already out? Wouldn't he have gotten the guns in the bathroom? So none of it makes any sense.
I have to make one other point because I think that it's super relevant and no one's tackling this story from this perspective. These are two guys who are meeting with someone in regard to real estate investment opportunities, which means that they have money, right? So oftentimes when we talk about discrimination or the way people are treated differently in this country, the issue of race makes people really nervous. No, it's not about race, it's more about socioeconomic status. No, it's not. No, it's not. These dudes have more money than I do. These dudes have more money than a vast majority of Americans do, right? They're trying to invest in property, in real estate. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money they have, doesn't matter how successful or well-to-do they are. All that matters, according to some people, is what they look like and whether or not they pose a threat based on stereotypes.
Okay, so now let's get to some of the fallout from this, and there's a decent amount of good news out of this. So first of all, the Philadelphia District Attorney is Larry Krasner. He's very, very progressive, and he was like, yeah, no, we're not keeping them. He said there is not sufficient evidence to charge the men with a crime and they are free to go. So doing the right thing there as soon as it crossed his desk, as far as we can tell. Now, in terms of Starbucks, their CEO is flying into Philadelphia to meet with those two guys in specific and to meet with others as well, to let them know, hey, this is not our policy at all. And not only is it not our policy, we're now going to do training about unconscious bias so that all of our managers realize, hey, this is something that is pervasive throughout the country. Look, the police commissioner who's defending all this is also African American. I read somewhere that the manager in question might be Latino. I don't know or care that much about that. The point is that that's why you do the unconscious bias training, because it's an unconscious bias, and it's not only in white people in the country, it's in all of us.
That's exactly right. I think that one of the most common misconceptions is that if you are anything other than white, then you are unable to have any type of bias or to ever discriminate or have prejudice. And it doesn't matter. Like, everyone has issues they need to work out. I don't care if the worker who called the cops is Latino or black herself, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so one other positive reaction from Starbucks comes from Rosalind Brewer. She is, Brewer, by the way, is the last name for somebody who works at Starbucks. Is awesome. She's the chief operating officer. That means basically she's the #2 person in charge in all of Starbucks, which is a gigantic company. She said this is a teachable moment for all of us. So they're going to take it as an opportunity to not only fix the situation, but to go further. She also happens to be African American. And she said that she's got a 23-year-old black son, obviously, and that the video was painful to watch. So obviously a very important executive there at Starbucks, vowing for logical reasons, for many different reasons, to tackle this. So people's frustrations is very understandable, but like when they did the Craigslist killer thing and they were like, oh, it's all Craigslist's fault. It could have been the Yellow Pages killer. That's just where the guy happened to find people. So this problem, I'm sure, does happen in other Starbucks because you have individual human beings deciding who is allowed to stay and who is not allowed to stay, who is a danger and who is not a danger. Not based on whether they actually are a danger, but based on their perception. And sometimes, yes, their unconscious bias. But it's not particularly Starbucks. I'm sure it happens all across the different restaurants and different venues. And it looks like in this case, in my opinion, Starbucks has taken some excellent measures to combat it.
All right, let's move on to a little bit of good news. Compton rapper Kendrick Lamar has won a Pulitzer Prize for his album Damn. That's the name of the album, and it's pretty awesome. You should listen to it if you have any interest in rap music, because it was a phenomenal album. And he has made history by winning this Pulitzer. Let me give you the details. He's one of the first hip hop artists, or is the first hip hop artist to win the Pulitzer's music category, which traditionally has honored classical works. Even after the category was opened up to jazz and pop in 2005, jazz master Ornette Coleman won in 2007, but the selection of Lamar is the Pulitzer's biggest swing toward popular music.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. So I don't know much about Kendrick Lamar because I stopped listening to the radio about 10 years ago. And so, but you all love him and I'm sure that he's fantastic. And the ideas that he talks about is, to me, way more important and is really interesting. But I'm gonna go on a little bit of a different rant here about the Pulitzer. I love how they're like, oh, we're gonna get a little radical here. No, fine, we're gonna open up to jazz.
I know.
Like, wow, don't take too many chances, big guy.
I thought the same thing.
Okay.
So edgy.
Yeah, so I know that people, and Pulitzer folks are wonderful people, okay? But the idea that the only good art is dead art, they wouldn't call it dead art, they'd call it culture, opera, ballet, whatever. I can't stand that. Those are ancient forms of art. They're fine.
They're not
They're
okay.
fine. They're fine.
Okay,
And if you're into it, and Anna did ballet a long time.
And I like classical music as well.
It's fine, but it's dead. Living art is what Kendrick Lamar does.
Okay, let's all calm down for a second. You're getting a little crazy right now. Okay?
No, opera
but you only
and
see through
Shakespeare.
your narrow lens. Like there's still.
It's not narrow. Everybody else is narrow. I know that sounds funny. Okay, so Shakespeare and opera back in the day were pop culture. The ruffians went to see Shakespeare. It was comedy. It was like a movie, and he was really good at it, and people loved it. It was pop culture. It's not pop culture anymore, and opera isn't because it's in a different language and no one understands it. So intellectuals like it. Anyway, I know I'm a bad guy.
You are.
So bottom line is, thank you, Pulitzer, for opening your vision a little further and seeing that pop culture does matter because it's living art and it matters to millions and millions of people that listen to Kendrick Lamar and are influenced by him.
So the reason why I'm very happy about this is because a lot of times rappers get portrayed in one very specific stereotypical way, right? They're just rapping about their money, they're rapping about women in a very disrespectful way, and that's it. That's all they're all about, or maybe rapping about drugs and gang life. But there are so many rappers out there who actually give people like me an education about what their communities go through. And I think Kendrick does a really great job of that. J. Cole does a really great job of that. There's this one song, I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's called Neighbors by J. Cole, that like the lyrics of that song really get to the heart of a political system that has done certain people wrong. And I think it's incredible. And he also talks about how his neighbors think he's selling dope. And I just love that because he's a rich black guy, because he's successful in the music industry. He buys this beautiful big home in a neighborhood and the neighbors probably think he's selling dope. And it just touches on something that I think a lot of people go through.
Yeah, look, I grew up listening to Public Enemy, and also Run DMC and Beastie Boys and those guys too, but Public Enemy, that's an education. They should have won a Pulitzer a long time ago. And Ice Cube, super crass in a lot of ways, says a lot of questionable things. It's rap, right? It's pop culture. On the other hand, if you've never lived that life, he gives you a window into that life, and that is really, really interesting. And if you're open-minded about it, you might learn a thing or two. and I could, give you 1,000 Ice Cube quotes that I love. But instead, I'm going to give you a Pulitzer Committee quote.
Yes, I made a graphic. You have to read it.
Okay,
it's so good. It's
all
so
right.
good.
This is about Kendrick Lamar. They say the Pulitzer Committee praised the album as a virtuosic song collection unified by its vernacular authenticity and rhythmic dynamism that offers affecting vignettes capturing the complexity of modern African American life. Well, indeed it does. It does do just that. I'm not sure I would have phrased it that way, but I enjoyed the Pulitzer Prize phrasing it that way. Nice turn of phrase.
That's the reason why they love classical music in the ballet. Come on.
Well, Kendrick does have vernacular authenticity. We can all agree to that.
If ever there was a "I do declare" statement, that would be it.
Collection unified by its vernacular authenticity and rhythmic dynamism that offers affecting vignettes capturing the complexity of modern African American life. So I do declare, Kendrick, you are now the winner of a Pulitzer Prize.
All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Young Turks on a momentous day. What now? What now? We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
Hey, how dare you? That's the problem. You're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the is the liberal media? Where is it? I don't see it. No. These are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working. So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
So what's happening in the Democratic Party is what used to happen in the general election. We would have a person who represented workers and the people and the voters, and then the Republicans would represent business and corporations and Wall Street, and we'd have a frickin' election. That's happening all inside the Democratic Party this time.
And instead of focusing on issues that actually matter to millennial voters, for instance, we're focusing on non-issues in the country. The fear-mongering about Muslims and terrorism.
Here comes Bernie in Illinois. Tell your friends, tell your family, this thing's not over. That voice in the wilderness, it created a ripple effect, which then now is a tidal wave as we stand right now. I love this show. We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
Do you trust the establishment media?
The United States economy has never been better. Monetary policy is spectacular.
Everybody thought Jamie Dimon was the king of Wall Street last week. Well, it might be Ken Lewis now. He takes the crown. The best sales force out there is Merrill Lynch, and now it goes to BofA. It's pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. Lewis now. Buying opportunity.
I do think this is a buying opportunity. We're going to see a stabilization and just a tremendous snapback.
The rally will be jaw-dropping.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is not a spontaneous protest against economic inequality.
This is what we mean by the establishment press.
It is a well-thought-out campaign.
To bring down the infrastructure of this country.
The embarrassment is that I'm given credibility in this world because of the disappointment that the public has in what the news media does.
I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I've learned a little bit about the cost of war. What the president is trying to do, and I agree with him, is to do everything that we can without going to war.
So what do you say to your critics? I'm talking about Democratic critics who say, you know what, he's really just a socialist pacifist.
I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sake.
Most analysts are saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win in a landslide.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
We've got Trump at 279, 259.
Wait a minute. No. Winning the presidency.
I know you don't believe that. We're not going to be polite anymore. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight back.
Fight for a free and independent media. We're done with politeness. We fight back. We are going to put together the best investigative reporting team in the country. TYT will give you the 4 horsemen.
and we will let them gallop. Help unleash real journalism in the country. We don't need anybody else anymore but you guys. This is going to be amazing.
All right, we're back on Young Turks. Just a couple of comments for you guys. Dances With writes in on Twitter, white privilege is where you question the police unchallenged by said police. Yes, like earlier today, I did a story about how Donald Trump and Michael Cohen are asking for all the evidence that were seized. They're like, no, let me look through it first and then I'll decide what to give prosecutors.
Doesn't work that way, oh boy.
Yeah, I'm just amused by the idea of like any other person being arrested. Like, no, I'll give you the evidence. You can't just seize it. Yeah, we already seized it, it's gone. Anyway, Kimberly Buckley writes in on YouTube Super Chat. The police tell citizens they can't do anything about guns, yet arrest these two gentlemen at Starbucks for nothing. So it's an interesting story I didn't get to today. Hopefully I'll do it tomorrow. Part of the story was in Vermont. There's a guy who promised to do the biggest mass shooting in American history. Way to let him go. I told you that all the comments that the shooter in Parkland wrote on YouTube, people are like, oh my God, why didn't the cops stop him? Are you kidding me? There's no way the cops could have stopped him. The NRA would have been all over them, civil rights attorneys, maybe even the ACLU. I don't know, I don't want to besmirch anyone, but a lot of people would have been like, no way, you got to let him go, just comments online, right? So this guy made comments about how he's going to kill as many people as he could possibly kill in his school. And they're like, well, he didn't do it yet, so we got to go. And he's free to go, okay? Meanwhile, those two guys at Starbucks didn't do anything under arrest.
Yep.
Okay, unfortunately, sad reality. All right, so let me give you members of the day. Daxon LeCount, which is an excellent name, and Katrina Anderson are our members of the day. Today in the post game, I went to a King Tut exhibit here in LA. Look at me, I'm a little sophisticated, okay? I, of course, learned a lot about the Egyptian culture from back in the day, and I want to share that with you guys and my thoughts and ruminations on that, if you will. And then members get interviews live. They get put out for everybody else in about 24, 48 hours. But today, after Rebel headquarters and the post game, I'm interviewing Shepard Fairey, which is kind of awesome.
That's the artist guy, right?
Artist, yeah, probably best known street artist in the country. And so check out the Shepard Fairey interview live if you're a member, tytnetwork.com/join. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. The governor of Kentucky is apologizing following some questionable statements he made in regard to teachers who protested the measly amount of money they get paid and the severe underfunding of their schools. Now, I want to show you what Governor Bevin had to say. This is what got him into a lot of trouble. Take a look.
The number, I saw a lot of people hanging out, shoes off, even early in the morning, hanging out, smoking, hanging out, leaving trash around, taking the day off. You know, here's what's crazy to me. You know how many hundreds of thousands of children today were left home alone? I guarantee you somewhere in Kentucky today, a child was sexually assaulted that was left at home because there was nobody there to watch them. I guarantee you somewhere today, a child was physically harmed or ingested poison because they were home alone because a single parent didn't have any money to take care of them.
So his argument is that the one day that the teachers protested in Kentucky was dangerous because all these kids probably were left home alone. There's no one else to watch after them. So they got sexually assaulted or drank poison.
So does that happen every day that they have a break? Like that they have a vacation, their parent-teacher conferences, the parents not home, people are constantly drinking poison and et cetera? Or could it be that Bevin doesn't like that teachers are finally asking for a raise after all these years of getting crushed by the system? And so he'd like to blame them for sexual assault of kids that they had nothing to do with at all, let alone the insanity of kids randomly poisoning themselves because their teachers are on strike.
He just, by the way, just made crazy things up. And I find it odd that his mind went there in the first place. Why did his mind go there? Why did your mind immediately think of kids being left home alone who then get sexually assaulted
By who? By the way?
Yeah, I don't understand why his mind went there. So he got a lot of backlash over those statements, and he's been fighting against tax increases that would help to raise enough revenue to pay these teachers a decent salary and also help fund these schools. So,
but Anna, to be fair, but it would hurt his donors and all of his rich friends.
Right.
So that, you say tomato, I say tomato. I mean, a lot of people in Kentucky would like to help the teachers. On the other hand, there's rich donors to help.
By the way, a lot of people, including Republican politicians in the state of Kentucky. So for instance, lawmakers in Kentucky increased taxes. They passed a bill that would increase taxes and raise $480 million for these schools. And Bevin didn't like it, so he vetoed it, right? Now, the way that the taxes or tax increase would work is it would specifically focus on raising cigarette taxes by 50 cents, and then it would increase sales tax for certain services. So if you're doing home improvement, for instance, the sales tax involving home improvement would go up to 6%. So again, they would raise $480 million and they would help fund the schools that way. But Bevin didn't like it, so he vetoed it. Republican lawmakers overrode his veto because they feel strongly about this, and I actually give them a lot of credit for that. And he got very salty after they overrode his veto. He did not like that. He said that this was a sloppy way of raising the money and that it's not transparent enough.
Okay, so I just got to jump in with a couple of things there. So look, the taxes that they raised are a little bit regressive, so I don't love that, and it's easy to raise the cigarette taxes, et cetera. But would I take that so that we can get decent pay raises? Just a little bit of pay raises. Not like the teachers in Kentucky get rich off of this, right? Yes, I would definitely take that. But the reason that Bevin would care about it is because some of those industries that are affected, like the tobacco industry, particularly strong in places like Kentucky. That's why he cares and calls it sloppy. In which case, then we say, all right, Bevin, would you like to raise taxes in a different way, right? Do you have a proposal to raise maybe the teacher salaries by even more, by doing a non-regressive tax, that one that just hits corporations or people, or people in the higher end of the brackets? No, he would not like that. So it's an excuse to not do it and not to back the teachers.
Of course, he doesn't care. Now, he has apologized for his previous statements. Let's take a look at that.
On Friday evening, I made some comments about the unintended consequences of schools being shut down, some with just a matter of hours of notice, less than 24. And the result that can come from that, my concern for children who are left vulnerable as a result of that. One of the other things that's clear about unintended consequences is sometimes the words that people say, the way in which they say it, or just the misunderstanding that comes from that also can have unintended consequences. And I think that is what happened from the very things that I said. The responsibility for such things falls on the person doing the speaking. In this case, that was me. And so for those of you who understood what I'm saying, thank you. I appreciate that you do. But clearly, a tremendous number of people did not fully appreciate what it was that I was communicating or what it was that I was trying to say. And I hurt a lot of people. Many people have been confused or hurt or just misunderstand what it was that I was trying to communicate. That's my responsibility. It truly is. And I apologize for those who have been hurt by the things that were said. Was not my intent whatsoever.
It wasn't my intent to hurt your feelings. I was just saying that since you're protesting to maybe make a little more money, other kids who are left home alone might be sexually molested, or they might drink poison and maybe die, and it might be your fault. But don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's your fault. Anyway.
That was one of the worst apologies I've ever seen. So let's just be clear first of all on why he's apologizing. He's a right-wing Republican. They don't like to apologize no matter how wrong they are. It's only because the Republican-led legislature censured him. And people like Regina Huff, who's a Republican legislator in Kentucky, basically called him a coward. And so, you know why? Because real people in Kentucky, sure, they might get swayed by the social issues and vote Republican, and now they're pro-life, et cetera. They love guns, whatever it is, right? There's a host of issues that leads them to the Republican Party. But they don't hate teachers, and they don't want their kids to go to terrible schools. Like, there's only so much you can get them to work against their own self-interest. If they could see with their own eyes, we're like, but that's my kid. And I can see he's not getting an education. And that's Miss Robinson, and I know her, and she's not a bad person. She's my kid's teacher. And now you're telling me she's responsible for sexual molestation? What are you talking about? Right? So they can see with their own eyes. So he was in a world of trouble. That's why all of a sudden he goes to apologize, but he can't get himself to do it. So he's like, if other people did not fully appreciate my comments, that's not an apology.
Yeah.
That's not. If you misunderstood my comments, and no, we didn't misunderstand your comments. Your comments were incredibly clear, right? No, then at least have the decency to say, "Hey, listen, I shouldn't have said those things because it left you with the impression that it's the teacher's fault." And by the way, it's not remotely true. There was not a rash of kid poisonings on that day, right? But he can't get himself to ever admit the reality or the truth. So he has to basically, in his so-called apology, blame you for misunderstanding his comments. There was no misunderstanding at all. They were crystal clear.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
T-1 minute till landing. TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks?
We're good.
Iguana? Sir, we are go for landing. Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir, I've been looking over this joke for the past hour, and with the bandit firing now weeks old and waning in
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
The hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stopping.
40 seconds.
All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them.
30 seconds.
The Trump joke's our safest option. Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Jink try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Cameras, position, social media team.
Brace for unfollows. 10 seconds. As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be the finest hour 2 yet.
Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Jink.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
So right now I'm walking by Tim Robbins. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Just going to walk by, see if he notices me, see if he recognizes me. It's cool, like Tim, he's acting like he doesn't or see me, like he doesn't notice me. It's all right. It's cool. A lot of people are recognizing me. It's okay if Tim Robbins plays it cool. He is playing it cool. I'm going to walk this way. See, I'll give him a chance to recognize. Let's see if he notices me. Ready? Maybe he didn't notice me because, my head was turned. It's probably because my head was turned. You think it was because my head was turned? I think it was because my head was turned.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Lots of comments from YouTube Super Chat. Markix83 just sends in a heart.
Aw.
Thank you. Jaffe Music, or Jalfie Music, says, love to all of ye, the entire team and the viewers. Right back at you. And Brian Sontag writes in, Washington Post, quote, Starbucks manager who called 911 on black men no longer at the store, according to a Starbucks spokesman. So, look, to me, actually firing that person is not, it's not the answer.
Yeah, I agree.
I have no idea whether they should have been fired or not. I know what they did was really, really wrong. But I think a conversation is almost always better unless there was bad intent. If there was bad intent, then yes, goner, no question about it. But Starbucks is gonna have that conversation. Whether they should have had it with that person still being employed there, it's impossible to know because we didn't talk to them.
Right.
All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. A leading gay rights attorney has died after setting himself on fire during a protest. This was at a New York park, and he intentionally did this. The whole purpose was to make a statement in regard to the environment and what we are doing to it. His name is David Buckle. A suicide note near the lawyer's remains said he had burned himself or set himself on fire using fossil fuel to symbolize the damage humans are doing to the earth. He also reportedly sent a note to multiple news organizations, including the New York Times, warning that people were dying early deaths as a result of breathing in bad air. He also said that pollution ravages our planet, oozing I can never say that word, inhabitability via air, soil, water, and weather. So this is pretty devastating, and I was hesitant to do this story because my commentary on it is a little harsh, but this is not the way to do it, because I think a misconception that he had was that other people would care that he did this to himself. And the sad truth is they don't. The sad truth is, this might be a news story today, but everyone's gonna forget tomorrow. And the only way to really push for real change is to keep fighting. And it's tough, it's hard, it's devastating at times, but that would have more of a chance toward leading to change than taking your own life.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let me give a little bit of context though. So David Buckle has actually seen change happen in his life, and he's fought for that change, and he's helped to make it happen. He was the lead lawyer in the case of Brandon Tina, that was a transgender teen who was brutally raped and later murdered in Nebraska. They wound up turning that into a movie called Boys Don't Cry back in '99, starring Hilary Swank, and it was a very, very well received movie, and for good reason. It was amazing. But the story itself is of course much more important, and he represented that teen, and he fought for the civil rights for gay Americans in a heroic way, and the LGBT community celebrated his life today as they of course mourn for him. And so he's done some wonderful things, and look, my guess is that he was at a place in his life where this decision made sense to him. And I'm sure that he wouldn't recommend it to necessarily the others, right? And there are probably other factors that went into it, and not just the stance on fossil fuels. But I'll go further than Anna. Not only are unfortunately people going to largely forget it tomorrow, but it's a misimpression that we live in a democracy, that if you create enough public outrage that it will make a difference. But unfortunately, we don't really live in a democracy, and it doesn't matter how much public outrage there is.
Yeah, I mean,
there's two issues. I mean, there's dozens upon dozens of issues, but the two that happen to be literally at 93% is federal background checks for guns, and we can't get them. What do you need, 95% in a democracy, 98% in a democracy? It doesn't really matter. And money out of politics is at 93%, but they won't do it. Why? Because they serve their donors, they don't serve us. So he's absolutely right that the fossil fuels are ravaging our country. But even if 99.9% of us agreed and wanted action on climate change, we wouldn't get it because the fossil fuel industry has lobbyists that have bought our politicians. So I wish he hadn't done it in this way. Obviously led a heroic life in a lot of ways, and it's an incredibly powerful message. And I wish that it was better received. I'm afraid that it won't be. And finally, he said, a life of privilege requires actions to balance the harm caused. And the greater the privilege, the greater the responsibility. I don't think that he had a responsibility, or anyone does, to do it this way. But let's all band together to at least bring back our system of government, fight for democracy, so that we can actually have the voice of the people heard on this issue as well as others.
Yep. All right, final story for you all. The Government Accountability Office has done an analysis into Scott Pruitt's spending. They specifically looked at that soundproof phone booth that he built in his government office. He spent $43,000 on it. Was that the right thing to do, or did he break some laws? Well, according to the GAO, the $43,000 soundproof phone booth, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt installed in his office last year violated federal spending laws. The GAO General Counsel said the agency failed to notify lawmakers that it was exceeding the $5,000 limit for agency heads to furnish, redecorate, or otherwise make improvements to their offices. The agency also violated the Federal Anti-Deficiency Act because EPA obligated appropriated funds in a manner specifically prohibited by law. Now, Scott Pruitt's response to all this criticism is, it's necessary for me to be able to do my job. Like, he's the head of the EPA. No other head of the EPA has ever needed a soundproof phone booth in their office. In fact, they have soundproof booths for employees that need it. It's just not in his office. He would just have to walk into another room to use it. By the way, $43,000 to build a phone booth. I don't care if it's the most soundproof booth ever. $43,000? I feel like some contracted employees here, contracted businesses here might have taken advantage of the situation.
Yeah, look, I don't know how much construction costs in Washington. I'm not surprised by that. What I care a lot more about is why did he want that booth? But let me give you a little further context here as well. So a lot of the government offices have what is called a sensitive compartmented information facility, known as a SCIF. So if you are the head of the EPA and for some reason you have to take a top secret call, it's a little hard to conjure up a reason why you would need to do that, let alone so regularly that you need to have a phone booth in your office to do it. But there could be some, hey, the Chinese have attacked, making up something, Al-Qaeda attacked.
I have a perfect example. When you're hitting up your homies in Morocco and you're trying to convince them to purchase some liquefied natural gas from the United States because your homies in the US let you stay in their condo for like $50 a night. Yeah, maybe that.
That might be the real reason.
Yeah.
But like the scenario you can conjure for a real need to do this is Al-Qaeda's attacked us with anthrax. You're the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. I got to tell you all about it. So go down 2 floors to this compartment, and we're going to do a call on this. But that was exceedingly rare, right? And when the Inspector General or the GAO General Counsel in this case looked at it, they said this phone booth is not even certified as a SCIF. So he can't even use it for that reason.
I can't with this guy.
So no, look, to Anna's point, understand why he wants a sound booth. I mean, when Ben Carson wants a $31,000 dining room table, as he himself basically explained, my wife wanted a nice table, right? Nobody wants a nice sound booth. That's not a thing that exists unless you're doing a radio show, right? Do you want a soundproof phone booth? Why? To make illicit calls. Calls to your donors, your previous donors, to your future donors, calls to the industry you do not want traced, including by the government. If you go into the room that they have for you, those calls are probably recorded. You don't want that call recorded. That's why you set up your own phone booth so you can do dirty deals, because that's who Scott Pruitt is. He's dirty through and through, and now he's broken a law. But under the Trump administration, it's not the bug, that's the feature. He'll probably be rewarded rather than punished.
Exactly. I don't think there will be any consequences for him, but it is interesting to see a government organization look into this and find that he did break laws.
All right, we got to go. Bye-bye. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Quick announcements as usual. Arizona special elections coming up. That's the one that Brianna Westbrook was in. That's the first one that we covered in this election cycle. She was just Democrat. She happened to lose in the primary. Now her primary opponent is up against a really right-wing state senator, Debbie Lesko, in that district in Arizona. And that's a very heavily Republican district represented by Trent Franks in the past. He obviously retired. It went to Trump by 21 points. New poll out today shows the Democrat, Hiral Tiperneni, in the lead, 46-45. So this wave is unbelievable. By the way, Brianna that night came on the Young Turks and said she would immediately go over and help Hiral Tiperneni to win the election. And then if they're going to do another primary, once she becomes a Congress person, then they can have another primary. But for now, I think it makes sense for everybody to rally to defeat the right-wing Republican. And previously, there'd been a big lead for the Republicans in this district, but all of a sudden, here comes that wave. So everybody remember, please, for God's sake, vote. tytnetwork.com/register to find out how you can vote and register in your neck of the woods. And so in Arizona specifically, that election is coming up, so make sure you mount up for that. And then if you want to participate with us and in any way, suggesting guests or sending in cartoons of some of the folks that we've interviewed, or in ways that I can't possibly imagine, send us an email at rebelhq@tytnetwork.com, rebelhq@tytnetwork.com. Okay, now let me go on to my next guest. All right, joining us now is John Peters. He is running for a special primary election in Congress's Ohio's 12th district, I should say. So John, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So now, your incumbent there is a Republican, and he left his seat in January of 2018, right?
Correct.
And so talk to me about the special primary election. Fill me in on like the dates and how it works and what happens first, et cetera.
Well, right now we've got a situation. We got 7 Democrats that are running for this special election and general election primary. The general and special election primaries are on the exact same day, which is May 8th. And that's kind of where we're at. And we're going up against about 12 Republicans.
So I'm super confused by that. And I suspect some parts of the audience are as well. So what does it mean to have the special election and the primary election on the same day?
So basically what's going to happen is voters are going to go into the ballot boxes, and they're going to have a choice between 6 Democratic candidates that are in the special election primary, and then they're going to vote for their choice of 7 Democrats in the general election primary. So they're voting for 2 different, well, the same person or 2 different people, basically on the same day. And there's going to be a special election primary in August and then a general election primary in November. Basically what happened is they made it very confusing for people.
So I think I understand. I think you said one thing wrong there. In August, there's going to be a general election, which is a special election. That's going to decide the congressperson for apparently a couple of months. And then in November, you're going to have another general election, the regular order one, the one that we all have in November. And so for the people who win, could it be that different people win the primaries for the special election and a different set win the primaries for the election that happens in November?
Yes. I mean, if I were to win the general election, that's exactly what would happen, because I'm only on the general election ballot. When I got in this in July 4th of 2017, I was one of only 3 candidates that got in. Now, once Seabury resigned, multiple candidates jumped in, sensing an opportunity to basically hold a political seat. So very much so. We could have multiple people we could have 2 different Democrats and 2 different Republicans running for 4 different, seats.
Gee, I don't know why I would have ever been confused. But one last thing on the mechanics here, because it is really interesting. I've almost never seen anything like this in elections, and then we'll get to, of course, who you are and your policy priorities. So it's possible that someone could become the U.S. congressman from this district by winning a special election, but not win the primary for the general election, and hence not even on the ballot in November.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
That's where we're at.
And by the way, that's the scenario you're rooting for, because you're not in the special election. So you want to win the primary for the general election so you could represent Democrats in November.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So now there are 7 Democrats, as you explained. Why you as opposed to the other 6?
I get this question, and to be honest with you, I'm not necessarily special. I'm just a regular person. I'm an intervention specialist, a teacher. And I jumped in because I'm legitimately concerned for the future of my kids and our children. So I think the biggest issue is regular people. We would go to Congress and we would basically vote on policies that would help regular everyday people. That's just what we would do. Well, the situation that we're in right now is we have politicians that are only worried about their next reelection cycle, what they're going to do in the next 2 years. And they're not addressing issues that working people are going to face in 10 to 20 years. Like the idea of what work is going to be in 10 to 20 years is going to be very different. Automation is moving on and it's taking over jobs that, technology and computers are taking over skills and jobs that people used to do. And our politicians, only worrying about getting reelected, aren't addressing those issues.
Yeah, so John, I'm going to give you the award for the most honest answer in Rebel headquarters history, so I appreciate that. That's an important award to win. We're based the whole network on honesty, so that's great. Now, I hear you, but there's probably other regular folks in this election too, right? So there's usually the way these elections work, and I don't know the 12th District of Ohio that well, but there's usually a Mr. Moneybags, and they're usually supported by the Democratic Party and the DCCC. And sometimes there's 2 Mr. and Mrs. Moneybags, and then the rest of them are regular folks. And then the DCCC usually works really hard to defeat you guys. So
it's as if you know exactly what's occurring in this exact election. I mean, it's coming from somebody who's never ran for political office before, or has never done anything like this. I had no idea I would be battling the Democratic Party. If you said that when I entered this race that the Democratic Party would be attacking me, I'd have told you were nuts. I've had people that are inside these local party politics actually contacting my employer and making false accusations about me so I could lose my job. They're asking me to be terminated because of a false accusation. That's what's happening in this race when you speak truth to power. When you go after the fact that the Democratic Party is planting a politician into this race, somebody that has all the political things where they jump from one office to another. And the fact that I'm not afraid to point that out, they don't necessarily take too kindly to that.
So guys, I want people in the audience to understand we're in mid-revolution. So there are thousands upon thousands of people like John running all across the country, and I talk to them almost literally every day on Rebel headquarters. And the old way of doing things is you just get someone really rich or who knows a lot of rich people or who's worked in politics long enough to know enough rich people. And the Democrats say, no, only the rich can win. So we have to, but if that's the case, John, why not just let you run the race? And according to their theory, you have no chance anyway, so you would lose. Why bother attacking you?
Because I'll tell you why they bother attacking me is because I'm doing something completely different. If you go to johnpetersforthe12.com, you go to John Peters for the 12 Facebook page, I try and as somebody who wants to represent people, I try and speak as much as possible. I try and show people speaking as much as possible. So I don't go into these clubs and organizations and rooms and just post pictures of me going, like with a picture. I post what I'm saying on my Facebook page. I post my question and answer sessions, my speeches online for everybody to see. I even post commentary and funny videos and put it out there. Because in a representative democracy, the most important thing is that people speak, and we have to speak. And our politicians aren't speaking. They're trying to say as little as possible. And somebody who wants to say as little as possible to get elected and reelected isn't going to protect your right to speak.
Yeah, and that's Democratic Party 101. Don't say anything. In fact, there was a memo that some of the Democrats put out on Friday that if Trump fires Rosenstein, they said, whatever you do for the first 48 hours, don't say anything. Why? Why? It's maddening.
It's maddening to me as somebody who, like most regular everyday people, when somebody asks you a question, you answer it. And you don't spin, because people pick up on BS. They know it. And they're looking at these politicians and they're like, what are you talking about? When most of us are just like, answer the question.
So John, I want to ask you specifically about who you think might have been behind what you mentioned earlier. First, though, I want to make sure everybody sees your links. You mentioned your website there and your Facebook page, but I want everybody to see the donation and the volunteer links as well. Always the links are in the description box on YouTube and in the comment section on Facebook. So make sure you check those out. Really easy to click if you want to help John Peters. So John, who do you think is behind the calling your employer and the dirty tricks that they're using against you?
Well, I know the guy's name, and I'm not going to blast him out, but if you go to my Facebook page, I think he took his post down afterwards, but my employers had already talked to me, like my boss came to me and said, what's going on? I said, it's going to get worse because I'm not going to stop talking. And I'm not going to say that there's some conspiracy from the Democratic Party to somehow take me down or to shut me up, but it sure does seem like it. When you have multiple people that are from these little local party headquarters that are attacking you because you're simply saying and calling out the fact that their chosen planted Democratic Party candidate is a politician, which he has said, stood up in the middle of a debate and said, I'm a politician. And he's got into this race after T. Berry resigned. And because I point out these things that he has said and done, they're attacking me for attacking a Democrat. Well, to me, a Democrat is one thing, a politician is another. If you want to be a Democratic politician, I'm sorry. That's not what I'm looking for. And most regular everyday people are not looking for people to stand up there and be a politician. We want people to be real.
So John, last question for you. I see that you've got, the good number of progressive issues on your website that you're backing. But there's one on here that says public works program. So that's not always in people's priority list. So I was curious about that. Well, what would be your vision for a public works program?
I'm so glad that you asked that question because, like I said, work is changing. And kids don't want to sit behind, not every kid wants to go to college. Not every kid wants to sit behind a computer and type all day. Some kids just want their hands to get dirty working on something. And I don't think people care if a corporation is employing them or this country is employing them. But we need to make sure that our people have jobs that make enough money where they can achieve, they can support their kids' interests and goals. I would want a public works program to start building universal preschools, small localized preschools with big old playgrounds on the outside and inside, installing solar panels on every roof in this country and solving the problem. The world is waiting for us, the United States of America, to help, and we're not. Just doing those two things, and it could employ millions at good wages where they can support their kids.
And make a difference in the world. Makes sense. Now I see why you must be stopped. We can't have people making sense in Washington. All right, John Peters running in 12th District in Ohio. A spirited fight, as you can tell there. John, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Jake.
All right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, another story of real unity in the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, during these primaries, there's a lot of infighting, mainly led by the Democratic Party itself. But wait till you see this story in New Mexico of progressives who are working together. We'll show you when we come back. All right, we're back on the Young Turks. I mean, Rebel headquarters. I make that mistake quite often. It is part of the Young Turks Network. So joining us now is Jeff Apodaca, and he is running for governor of New Mexico. Now, first of all, Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jake. Cenk, thank you so much. It's looking forward to, thank you for having us on this evening.
No problem. Well, first off, before we get into your policy positions, this is an interesting story in your race because we actually had another candidate in the race on the show before. His name was Peter De Benedictis.
Peter D. Everybody calls him Peter D out here.
Yep. And I enjoyed him as a candidate and as a guest, and I enjoy his name, and we had a lot of fun. And so why am I interviewing you? One, because we believe in giving everybody a chance, and two, because he's dropped out of the race and endorsed you. So he had trouble raising money, which happens to a lot of the candidates. But why did he endorse you and helping you to get the race, to get the position?
Well, there were four of us in the race, and If people don't know, I'm from the private sector. I have never run for political office before. I think a lot of us have been just as frustrated in politics, specifically here in New Mexico. Our state is ranked 50th in education, 50th in job creation. My father was governor in the 70s, so I actually grew up in politics. But I was I guess, called to run for office because I'm tired of the status quo. I'm tired of the political leaders doing the same things over and over and actually burying our state. So four of us actually jumped in the race, and I've been out there running for over a year. I think Peter and our platform was very similar. We believe in an open democracy. Our state sits on $23 billion, and I've been talking from day one that we're going to invest $1 billion of it back into New Mexico instead of out of state to create jobs and opportunities for New Mexicans. So I think some of our platform was very similar. So when he decided to drop out of the race for funding, I believe funding reasons, he came to our campaign. I think he came to all the campaigns. He came to our campaigns and said, "You're the most similar to ours." And one of the things I've been talking about throughout the whole campaign is making sure that everybody will have a seat at the table in my administration. I think New Mexico has been hurt between the us against them's whole policies. And so our goal is to bring everybody together and work together. So we're very honored and blessed to have Peter endorse our campaign and actually helping us on the campaign trail.
So now you say that you want everybody to work together, and that makes sense. And to me, the progressive positions help people to work together and supported by a lot of independents. But conventional wisdom sometimes says the opposite. So, for example, are you for Medicare for all?
We do. We do believe in a single payer system. Whether you want to call Medicaid or stuff like that, we've actually looked at 3 single payer systems. And just so you'll know, I've been in the media business for 32 years. For the last year and a half, I've kind of run my own consulting company. I pay $23,000 a year for healthcare for my family. I have twin boys and a wife. And so we know how expensive it's become. We think a single payer system works better for all, works better for doctors, works better for everybody. And so we're in favor of a single payer system, whether it's Medicare for all or a universal system. I've looked at 3 different plans that I think would lower costs for everybody. And so I think it'd benefit the state of New Mexico. And I try to remind people in the state of New Mexico, over 52% of our population is already on some type of Medicare or Medicaid programs. So half our population is already really using a single payer system.
So would you have saved money under Medicare for all?
I would have. Actually, the calculations I've looked at, I would save about $8,000 a year.
Okay. It's
and
funny.
I'm gonna be very frank, Jake. 2 years ago, I'm not sure if I would have been for a single payer system. But what I've seen the last 2 years, I just think it works better for everybody.
That's really interesting. Have you sensed yourself moving left over that period of time a little bit more?
I don't worry about moving left or right. I look at each individual issue in the state of New Mexico. We have the highest unemployment in the country. We've lost 146,000 jobs in the state when every other state in the United States has grown their economy. And your listeners are going to be shocked about this. Everybody says we're a poor state. Our state literally sits on $23 billion of investment funds. They're in these land grant funds. Excuse me. Sorry about that. They're in these land grant funds, and our political leaders invest $23 billion of that outside our state. And so we've been saying from day one, we're going to invest $1 billion of it back into New Mexico, into small business, New Mexico industries, help grow the economy, things like that. So I think I look at every policy, what's best for New Mexicans, and I think that's why people look at our agenda, because it's common sense.
So are you in favor of a state bank?
We would favor a state bank. We have billions of dollars that sit around our state. And again, I've said this from day one, interstate banking has actually hurt a state like New Mexico. A lot of our state funds, a lot of our operational funds, look, the banks do what they do. They invest their money and get the best return that they can. Unfortunately, 84, 86% of every dollar our state spends goes outside the state of New Mexico. So we're trying to figure out ways how to invest that money back into the state. So we're looking at every option and creating a state bank. Specifically, we're the only candidate in the race that is pushing for legalization of cannabis. New Mexico in 1978 was the first state to have medical marijuana. My father actually signed it into law, never knowing 2 years later that his own son, me, would use medical marijuana to get through cancer. I got cancer in high school. So we know the medical benefits of it. So we feel like legalizing is an opportunity for New Mexico to create jobs and tax revenues. And we know the banking system is a major problem within that industry. So we think it's a simple solution for New Mexico looking at that. Now, and I know that California is looking at those options, and even I believe New Jersey and New York are even looking at those options now.
Yeah, no, look, all these positions, no matter what label that you want to put on them, there's a reason for people to have these politicians if they're running for office. It's because they're deeply popular. Legalizing cannabis is popular among independents, and at this point, even the Republicans and certainly Democrats, also state bank, also $15 minimum wage, also Medicare for all. So these are all very, very popular positions. We just need the folks who have more of the corporate PAC money to get out of the way so that we can actually get to actual positions supported by human beings in places like New Mexico rather than corporations. So I want to give everybody the links, Jeff. So is it Apo18.com? Is that what you call it, or Apo?
Apo18, and that's my nickname from childhood. Everybody calls me Apo for Apodaca. So Apo18.com is our website. Take a look at that. We have a jobs plan that will create 225,000 new jobs in New Mexico, and that's across the board from trade skill jobs to economic-based jobs. We create industries all the time between our labs and our universities, and those industries leave our state. So our goal is to invest into infrastructure. Our goal is to invest into New Mexico-based companies and grow a living wage and grow our economy. We then send $225 million outside our state in education. So we're going to move that back into New Mexico. So yes, take a look at our website, apo18.com. We have a jobs plan there, we have an education plan, and we have a health plan. And any of your listeners from New Mexico, that want to help our campaign, we're running against the establishment. There's no doubt about it. Even that my father was governor and I grew up in politics, this is my first time running for office. And I think New Mexico needs a major change in a new direction. And you are correct. It's time for some of the career politicians who have been in service for 30, 40, 50 years. They've literally buried our state. We're ranked 50th in job creation, 50th in education. And that's why we're running to invest into and turn New Mexico around.
For a New Mexico. All right.
I like that, by the way.
No problem. I'm here to serve. So everybody check out the links. They're down below in the description box, so it's easy to click on them. If you're watching on YouTube, comment section on Facebook. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Jack, hey, thank you so much. And if next time I'm out in LA, I think you guys are based in LA. Next time I'm in LA, I'll come by the studios. Keep in mind, I worked in LA for a long time in the entertainment business, so I probably know a lot of the same people.
All right, sounds good. We'll have coffee out here, or if I'm in New Mexico, which I've been plenty of times, played football once in White Sands. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but we did.
Well, it's a great place. I grew up there. I grew up going to White Sands all the time, so it's actually a great place for fun and have a great time.
Yeah. All right, sounds good. Hope to talk to you when you're governor, Apo.
I look forward to it.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, thanks so much, Jake. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, we're out of time. We got the post game coming up, where I'm going to talk a little bit about King Tut and I forgot to tell you guys, we came up with an amazing conspiracy theory about King Tut. So don't miss that. That's in the post game, and then afterwards, I'm going to be interviewing Shepard Fairey live. He is probably the most famous street artist there is in America. Did the Hope campaign poster for Obama. Did all the Andre the Giant posters you've seen all across the country. They have the word obey on them. So don't miss that live either. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and get all that. All right, we'll see you there.